Hi, everyone. Welcome to our happy hour reading celebrating Anna Hogeland. This is a Book Project Presents event. I'm Andrea Dupree, and I am the program director here at Lighthouse. And for those of you who don't know us, we're in Denver, and it is happy hour. So feel free to refresh your drinks while we do a couple little introductory things. The Book Project is our 2-year program for writers of book-length fiction, nonfiction, and hybrid narrative. We, every once in a while, do these kind of events, and we hope to be doing a lot more because in addition to Anna, we have 6 other writers with books coming out in the next year and a half. And while we can't take any credit for these incredible books they're writing, we can celebrate like crazy, and we will. So we're very excited. Introducing her tonight is Ms. Erika Krouse, who is one of the mentors at the Book Project and who is right now in the waiting room for her own reading. Is that right, Erika? Or you're right next door for your own reading?
Yes, that's right.
Her book is Tell Me Everything, the story of a private investigation. This came out in March, and it has been on fire here in Colorado and beyond. And I'm going to put in the chat links to all the books we talk about tonight, including Erika's, and a recording of her interview with Ryan Warner at Colorado Public Radio, because that's very exciting. So Erika will introduce our readers and talkers for tonight, and then you'll get a chance to ask some questions that might get answered, and then we'll go from there. So I'm going to turn it over to Erika Krouse.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Andrea, so much, and thanks to Lighthouse. Always thanks to Lighthouse. It is my extreme pleasure to be introducing you. Sorry, I think they're like some teeny. I have to do this at a weird location, so there's a lot of noise. So I do apologize for that. It is my extreme pleasure to introduce these 2 incredibly talented writers. So I'll start with Anna. Anna Hogeland's debut novel, The Long Answer, is out this month with Riverhead Books, and it's being translated into 7 languages. She is a psychotherapist in private practice with an MSW from Smith College School of Social Work and an MFA from UC Irvine. She lives in Vermont. The Long Answer has garnered star reviews from Kirkus and Booklist, and her review in the New York Times Book Review calls it a breathtaking roundup of the many ways women carry and lose babies and pregnancies, so many possible and impossible choices to be made, so many capitulations and coercions to be endured. And I don't know about you, but that really hits home for me right now. I first met Anna when she was a student in an advanced fiction workshop that was in a coffee shop that Lighthouse was renting, and there was a really loud refrigerator, so we were kind of shouting. But nonetheless, her talent shone through. After that, she became a Book Project student, and I got to work with her more intensely before she departed for the UC Irvine MFA. So it's been a pure pleasure for me to see Anna's work grow and develop into the book we are here to talk about today, which touches on women's issues that are both up to the minute and also timeless. Anna's fellow author and conversation partner today is Alison Fairbrother, and this is Anna's editor at Riverhead. Alison Fairbrother is an associate editor at Riverhead Books, where she has worked with authors such as Anna, Heather O'Neill, Amy Jo Burns, and Jenny Y. Xie. Her debut novel, The Catch, was published this month by Random House and is an Amazon Editor's Choice for June. She lives in Brooklyn. The Catch has been called a warm and funny debut novel, perceptive, wry, and witty by the New York Times. Also a big-hearted debut that absolutely crackles with smarts by Emma Straub. So we're very lucky today to talk to these 2 amazing writers. The structure of this event will be as follows. Each author will read a short excerpt from the beginning, I think the beginning of their books, first Anna and then Alison. then a very short Q&A with me, just about 3 questions about the editor-writer relationship. And then I'm going to turn it over to Alison, who will ask Anna some insider questions about the long answer. So you'll get this skinny. Then we're going to open it all up to the audience for you to ask questions. So there is a method to the madness. First, let's hear an excerpt from each book. So Anna, would you like to begin?
Sure. And thank you, Erika, so much. It's so nice to see you. I haven't seen you. Well, I've watched some of your events, but I haven't been able to be in conversation with you in many years. And I don't know if you even know this, but that was my first writing workshop ever.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was in like after hours at this coffee shop in North Boulder. And I kind of got, my husband is the one who convinced me to come, and I'd only been sharing writing with him until then. And I was like, I think you're really smart, but I don't know how much to trust you because like we're dating, you know? So I was pretty nervous to get, you know, an unbiased and brilliant stranger's work on eyes on my work. And I think the first workshop is so crucial for a writer to feel seen and held. And I remember you gave me some critiques too, even on my first one. I felt so respected by that. It felt like it wasn't just to make me feel good about myself, but I feel like the real compliment was that like, I can see you're going to get better. And you walk that line so beautifully with all of your students. And it's just, I was so lucky to have you as my first teacher.
Thank you. Do I get to take full credit? Can I take full credit for you? Because I will.
You should. And Alison's my first editor too. And it's like an equal honor to be, I just feel like the luckiest person to have the two of you kind of shepherding me into next phases. And it's so cool that Alison and I are like book twins too. She didn't tell me until very late in our in our relationship, like really only a couple months ago, that she had a book coming out too, which is just an amazing amount of self-control. So it's very cool to see your book out too. Okay, and thank you to Lighthouse, of course. Thank you, Lighthouse, for so many things. And for everyone who's here, I can't see your faces or your names, but I feel your presence. So thank you. I'm going to read from the very beginning of the novel, so there's no context. My older sister, Margot, called me and said, "You don't need to say anything, but I wanted to let you know I had a miscarriage. Just an early one," she added quickly. "I'm fine now." I was more surprised than saddened. I didn't know she was pregnant, or that she had been trying to get pregnant. "The worst of it is over," she said. "I'm relieved that I lost it when I did, before I was any further along. I only thought I was pregnant for a week. So as far as miscarriages go, this was about as easy as they get." She and Nick had quickly conceived their son, Alex, now just over a year old, and there was no reason to believe they wouldn't conceive quickly again. It was unlikely that a miscarriage would happen a second time, even though the odds were higher now than they were before. And she knew she was fertile and her body could carry a healthy pregnancy to term. They just had to wait for one cycle to try to conceive again. "There wasn't anything more to say," she said. "She'd just rather I hear it from her than from our mother." And she wanted to make sure that I would still feel able to talk to her about my pregnancy. I was 9 weeks when she called. She had been hesitant to tell me any of this for fear that I would shield her from it, which was exactly what she didn't want. "Truly," she said, "I only feel happiness for you. Please know that. How are you feeling anyway? Any better at all?"
That was beautiful. Thank you. Next, Alison, would you like to read an excerpt from your book, The Catch?
Sure, I'd love to. And let me just echo Anna and say what an honor it is to be here, to be reading with Erika and Anna. And thank you to Lighthouse. I've heard such wonderful things over the years about Lighthouse, and it's really exciting to get to participate. So thank you. I'm just going to read the first paragraph just to get a little taste of The Catch. Chapter 1. My father, a minor poet, celebrated holidays out of season. He couldn't get custody of all 4 of his children at once, So he moved the fall, spring, and winter holidays to the heat of summer. A man who had fathered 4 kids with 3 different women was unusual in our Maryland town. Neighbors gossiped and strangers commented. My father struggled financially, and I suppose he could have resented the way we tethered him, but he didn't. Over and over, he brought us into his world.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was beautiful. Thank you. So I'm so excited to begin this conversation. First, I have a question for Anna. So Anna, what's it like to be edited by a publishing author? What advantages or disadvantages do you think come with that territory?
Well, like I was saying before, Alison didn't tell me for so long. So I just thought I had this, well, actually, I remember our first conversation, you did say that I knew you had an MFA and that you said something about having written a novel, and I didn't know what stage it was in. So I guess I did know early on that you were a writer. I just didn't know that you had a novel coming out literally the same day as me until much later, but I guess you didn't either at that time. But it's such, I feel like the best thing you could hope for in an editor is somebody who understands your book, likes your book, understands your book, and knows how to make it better in a way that feels really congruent with you, can kind of see things that you can't see, but are very much in line with how you envision things. That makes sense. And someone that you feel really comfortable with and comfortable kind of discussing, like, because maybe I can't really think of a time where we really disagreed, but I was worried about that before we met, and like, what if my editor has some idea that I don't agree with, and I'm just this little debut child, and like, this is Riverhead, and like, how much can you advocate for yourself? And within minutes of talking to you, it just completely evaporated, and I just felt like I was talking to just a very smart person who really cared about the work, and there was never anything I feel like I couldn't ask you or say to you. And I kept thinking that I would lose you at some point, because like, once the manuscript is finished and it's submitted, and then it's kind of onto the publicity portion and tour logistics, and Alison just kept getting copied on all these emails. And I was like, this is amazing. I still get to have Alison around, and you still are. And I had no idea that I would be able to have you kind of on my team for so long, and it's been amazing. So in terms of what like a writer can bring that maybe someone else can't, it's maybe I could feel it without you even saying it, that like you understood how hard it is, and with these to change something at different stages. And I felt like you had been where I was at various points, even if you weren't explicit about it, just like, and you really were going through, very similar, like editorial finishing, getting ready to launch stages that I didn't know about. But I think that this is just more a general statement about the best readers. Like, I think that you have to be a good reader to be a good writer. I don't think all good readers are great writers, but all great writers are great readers. If that makes sense. Don't quote me on that, because it's a big generalization.
I was like, that's a great quote. I'm going to quote you on that.
But Alison is both. I guess I'll say this. I don't think I've ever met a great writer who just couldn't read well. I've never encountered that. And Alison very much has both. So I've felt so lucky.
That's awesome.
Thank you, Anna.
My next question is for Alison. So Alison, what's it like for you to be working on your debut novel alongside authors like Anna, who are also working on their own debut novels? What did you gain from that experiences, and what are perhaps some challenges, besides the fact that you're working a full-time job and then trying to do this yourself?
I mean, I think for any writer, the main challenge is having a day job. But in my case, I feel so lucky because my day job is so nourishing to my writing life, you know? It's such an extraordinary privilege to get to encounter novels like Anna's in the early stages of development, you know, and in Anna's case, her novel was so strong and gorgeous from the beginning. But I see a range, and I think getting that spark of excitement about a new project, a new manuscript, and then getting to work with an author to shape it. And by shape it, I really mean just like thinking through in an editorial relationship what the book wants to be and how to best get it there. You know, there's no right or wrong answer, I think, but sometimes editors can sort of step back and see a project and sort of understand the underlying themes and ideas that a writer is playing with, sometimes even when they can't yet articulate it to themselves verbally, but they have done it on the page, you know? And that's just such a special treat. You know, it's such a wonderful part of being an editor that I love so much. So having the opportunity to sort of nourish my writing by reading and working with great authors has really been a delight. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. Next question, my last question, before I turn this over to Alison, is what have you learned from each other in the experience of writing and editing your first novels?
I mean, so much. I don't even know where to begin, but the first thing that's coming to mind is I really felt like my novel, it was not perfect, but I felt like I had taken it as far as I could. I was pretty done with it when I sent it to agents and then to editors. And I was also kind of hoping I was done with it because I was like in labor. Like, I sure hope no one has big edits for this because they're not happening right now. I think my daughter, it was my due date when I signed with my agent, and I gave birth, less than 2 days later. And then I think we sold it to Riverhead when I was 3 weeks postpartum, and I had mastitis, and I was just like, not a human. Still feel not quite a human 2 years later, but I really felt like, yeah, I don't have capacity to work on this anymore. And something about the way Alison framed it, and there was some little bit of time, I think like 3 months had passed, and I maybe slept a tiny bit more and had a little more distance from it, but you were able to help me kind of get back inside it, which is so challenging when there's like this surface tension that starts to form over it. And I kind of was starting to think about my next project, and being able to break that surface tension and get back in and then get excited about it again. And I ended up writing a whole final chapter after I had sold it. I think we had kind of talked about an idea for it, but I actually wrote it after we had spoken. And I never thought I would have that in me to do at that point. And yeah, you made me kind of enter the plasticity stage again. And that's because everyone's going to have thoughts, and it's not really done until it's done. And that stage was just later than I thought, because I've never done this before, of course. And every time, I mean, even kind of like little edits at the end, I felt like I was able to kind of get back into it. And I can't tell you how many times I sent it because I don't know the process and thought, okay, it's really done. Like, I'm gonna have a drink. It's like really done. And then like 2 months later, like, okay, next round. And they get like, smaller and smaller. But I don't know if I answered your question, Erika, but
I think you did. Alison, how about you? What did you learn from Anna specifically?
Well, first of all, that it's possible to finish a novel when you're days from giving birth. I mean, enormous admiration for Anna. But I think
your adrenaline.
It's really when I learned what she had just gone through, after our first conversation, that she was weeks, out from labor. It was really amazing. But I will say Anna's novel is so extraordinary. I mean, I think one thing that I so admire and learned from her is, she has this novel that's sort of the braided story, the distinct stories of 5 women that feel so cohesive as a whole. And I think that that's so hard to do. You know, this isn't a story collection and it isn't a memoir. And yet she has created this like powerful, profound sense of a cacophony of women's voices and done it so that each story that you're in feels like you never want it to end. You know, it's so urgent and beautiful and profound, but it adds to this whole beautiful tapestry. It's so rare, I think, for a writer to really pull that off. And Anna it's just magnificent. This novel is magnificent. So I'm just, you know, I'm in awe of what she's done. And I definitely learned from her too. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, that is so beautiful. And I am going to turn over the questions to Alison now. So, and I will sign off, but I love you guys. And thank you so much for writing such great books.
Thank you, Erika.
Thank you, Erika. Good luck with your event.
I love the jumping between events. It's really amazing. It shows that she, you know, she has so much, she's so in demand as a writer, but she's still here for us. I mean, it's really lovely.
Yeah.
Well, Anna, I wanted to share with you that, I don't know if I ever told you this story, but I remember the first time I encountered your book. It was the spring, I believe, of 2020. And I had gone to Rhode Island. It was like the first trip I took post-pandemic, you know, not post-pandemic, but after the pandemic began. It was the first time I'd sort of gotten up the courage to leave my state. And I drove to Rhode Island to visit some friends, and we hung out outdoors only, you know. And I was supposed to be on vacation, but I got a ping with your novel in my inbox. And I started reading it while my friend went inside to like make another drink, and I couldn't stop. You know, I ignored all of my friends whom I had come to visit, and I visited with your characters instead. And that, I think, is such a testament to the novel, to, you know, being so blown away by it, how the complex and empathetic narratives of these women and the sort of assuredness of your prose. It's such an extraordinary reading experience. And I think it's like a sign of a really masterful piece of fiction when like you associate a time of your life with a book, you know. And for me, like the spring and summer 2020 was like about your book and reading you for the first time. So I want that being said, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about, you know, the question everyone wants to know the answer to when a writer has written a novel is sort of, how did you come to write this?
Well, thank you, Alison. I didn't know that. So I appreciate that story. I have kind of 2 answers to that, because there are sort of two starting points of writing the book for me. And the first one was, I was newly pregnant with my first pregnancy. I was honestly, I don't remember the true story now because I've been living with the lie of it for so long that I was actually thinking the other day, when did I actually start this? And I realized I actually did start before I was pregnant, but not just barely started it before. And then I was pregnant and I started writing, and I felt totally humbled by pregnancy immediately. I felt so grateful. Just everything was just on, like, just the intensity of every emotion, every thought, and every physical sensation was just so much more than I expected. And I had this image of myself being pregnant, just kind of like lying around being happy. Or like in a milk bath, or like whatever, you know, Beyonce looks like in that photo. And it just was not like that immediately. And it's just so much harder than I expected. And I really felt like a craving to know how other women had navigated this time in their life. And so I started writing. I knew I wanted to write something about it. And then this story just kind of came out of nowhere. I didn't ask for it at all. And it really hooked me and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And so I started writing toward it. And it was my sister had just had a loss. She had been pregnant. I didn't know she had been pregnant. And she had heard this other story about a woman who was my same gestational age. And there's something very strange for me, and I imagine I'm not totally alone in this, when you hear someone's like the exact same pregnancy stage that you are. It's like driving on a highway and there's someone like right next to you and you just kind of want to like slow down or speed up and just like not make eye contact. And I always find that really unsettling in the drive. I kind of want to be anonymous and just like focusing on my own driving. And if there's someone like right there going the exact same speed, the same place, I find it really unsettling. I don't know if I'm the only person who has that feeling, but I felt that way about this other woman I didn't know at all. And it went, completely fictionalized, but I could not stop thinking about just I still can't even articulate it. Like something about that setup really compelled me, like, a sort of pregnancy triangle. And everyone's in a very different place. But I just feel like I had to write toward it. So I wrote pretty much the first 2 chapters, which is quite a bit of the book, like 150-ish pages maybe, while pregnant. And I had this idea that it was going to be, kind of like The Emigrants by W.J. Sebald. He's the person that I'm modeled most closely after in terms of architecture for the novel. And then I found, and I was going to be this kind of like pregnant flaneur who sort of like is very much a vessel for other people's stories and trying to figure out how to survive this time. And then I learned that in real life, learned that my pregnancy was not, he had a severe congenital heart defect and wasn't going to live outside the womb, essentially. And it felt like the choices were to have him pass away with suffering or without suffering. And so I chose without suffering. It really honestly wasn't, that seemed like the only way I could move forward. And so then I had this book still, like I had this 150 pages of this book that I had written with the aim of it being like this arc of this Anna, I see she had my name, as she still does, but arc of her perfect pregnancy. And all these other women might have issues with their pregnancy, but not Anna. And then I felt like I had a choice to like scrap the book and start writing over, or kind of write from that point forward, which is what I ended up doing. But so I didn't start the book at that point when I lost my pregnancy, but I started a new book kind of built on top of the old one.
Anna's story is such a powerful kind of anchor there are so many narratives of women in the novel, and I was so moved by the different experiences that you explore through those women. Women who have been pregnant or longed to be pregnant, women who've chosen abortion, underwent miscarriage, struggled with infertility, and unplanned pregnancy. I mean, it's a real gamut. And also sort of the joy and dedication to childbearing and the joy of choosing childlessness. All of that is present in the book, and it's really extraordinary in that way. Reading the stories of these characters and the sort of agency they had over their decision making feels so important and empowering. It's such a beautiful project to sort of collect these narratives to show a wide range of experiences. And I'm curious how you decided to do just that, how you decided to showcase this range, this beautiful range. You could have chosen to just tell Anna's story. So talk a little bit about that choice, if you would.
It really didn't feel like a choice, which I feel is like a cop-out answer, but it felt like the only way I could imagine it being written is in this choral way. in part because the nature of family making and mother making and child making is, there's so many ways it can look, and this is by no means an exhaustive sampling. I think the stories that ended up in here are ones that I was really compelled by, and they are, totally fiction, but often had kind of a germ of a story I heard through a friend, through a article, through a posting. Like, they kind of, you could trace them back to something real, but ended up being totally fictionalized. And I feel like even though the stories are so different in the book and in real life, of all the things that can go right and go wrong and go sideways, I found that those, especially kind of going through my own loss and connecting with women around it, the details just don't matter really at all. And the emotional landscape is so similar for so many people. And part of that, maybe a lot of it, more than we want it to be, is rage and envy and bitterness and all these other feelings that can come with sadness and grief. I think those are all part of grief, which I know you write a lot about grief too. And so I think Erika's book does as well. And I think the grief is that each of us write about, is the nature of it is so different. And yet I felt some of those feelings, even if the loss is so wildly different. I heard somewhere someone talking about grief as an initiation into like a deeper way of feeling and accessing a deeper level of humanity. And most / all of us are initiated into the land of grief. At Emily Rapp Black calls it the city of grief, initiated into the city of grief at some point. And yeah, the details just stop mattering pretty quickly. At first they mattered a lot. Like, I kind of need to well, what exactly happens and what exactly how do I go through this? But I think that I wanted the characters to all have had a similar, all felt a range of emotion that was comparable, even if it came out in totally different ways. And so to have it just be my story or the fictionalized Anna story it just didn't even occur to me to do that. I was just frantically searching myself or other people's narratives, like I was saying earlier, before I even had the loss, and especially after the loss. It was like, how do I get through pregnancy? And then like, how do I get through this loss / I still don't have a baby. So how do I get to getting pregnant again and going through this pregnancy again? And the road just felt so long. And I know many people had traveled it, including my own mother. And I just clung to those stories like life rafts. And I should say that I had written a novel. I've written, I think, 4 novels to completion or near completion before I started writing this one. And only one of them made it to the point where I thought, I'm going to send this out to agents and really give it a go. And that one was auto-fictional as well, but very much kind of the Anna persona character was central. And in this one, she's much, more decentered until she isn't. But no, it didn't get signed. No one wanted that. I got some encouraging rejections, but mostly silence and kind of, form rejections. And so I was pretty sad about that. I mean, I don't want to, in retrospect, I think it all worked out for the best, but, I was not like in the happiest place at the time. And I also had just had my loss. So it was like the worst time. It was just very not a great time in my life. But in kind of hitting a place of lower hope than I'd ever been about my family that I wanted to create and the books I wanted to create and career I wanted to make as a writer, never felt so low about that happening. And that's when I started writing this book. So I really felt like it's very possible no one will want this book, because that just happened to me. Just because I went to a good MFA and I had good workshops sometimes, doesn't mean that a book is going to fall into my hands like the second I try to put one into the world. So I felt like I need to write what I need right now. And I really wasn't thinking or even hoping that it might turn into something until much later. I would say about a year after I had started writing it.
Well, it's so electric. I mean, it's electric with grief and profound loss and also hope, I think. I mean, one of the things that I find so hopeful about the novel is, it's not just about women's reproductive choices, though of course it is that, but it's also about relationships between women. It's about sort of what happens when women do share these stories or withhold them, sort of what happens when private experiences like miscarriage and grief are confided. And I know that writing about relationships between women is very important to you. Will you tell us a little bit about sort of why this is this subject is such a rich territory for you?
I think because I haven't figured them out yet. I have been so lucky in my romantic life. I've definitely had breakups and nights where I'm up thinking about interactions, and I've had my feelings about them, but I met my husband when I was 22 and we have a nice thing, and it's just sort of like moving along. And I don't like stay up thinking about those interactions with him. It's with my female friends and my sisters. I have two sisters, older and younger, and my mother. And those are I feel like for a lot of other people that those relationships seems to be the easy ones relatively. And then the romantic relationships are where the drama is. And for me, it's really always been the inverse. And I don't know why. And I've thought a lot about it, but I mean, this setup that I was speaking to earlier, where, the sister has a healthy toddler and just had a loss, and the Anna character is newly pregnant, and, the older sister, Margot, is trying to be happy for pregnant Anna, but is also clearly grieving, her loss. And then it's reversed, where Anna loses her pregnancy and Margot is pregnant, and having to, those dynamics are just so rich to me and so complicated. And I think irreducible, because it's not just envy, and it's not just love, and it's not just, when you see a baby who is the exact same age as the baby you would have had, but who passed away, that is your niece or your nephew or a best friend's baby, there's no one emotion that goes with that. And I feel like, so I think relationships with friends and sisters has always been really the most complicated relational territory for me. And then getting to kind of my early 30s and childbearing time, just like poured gasoline all over it, because the stakes of everything just got so high. And I'm sort of in the middle of this triangle right now where, one friend had a loss that was quite traumatic, and our other friend got pregnant by accident and is unsure if she wants to even keep the pregnancy. And I feel so for both of them, and they're having this, and it's like I could write this novel all over again, just with what's happening now, and it happens over and over again. And I do, there are some very notable exceptions to what I'm about to say about female relationships, platonic female relationships, actually both, all kinds. But speaking of platonic female relationships and sororal relationships not getting nearly enough attention, that's something I've been looking for in fiction for a long time, especially like adult sister relationships, are so complicated. And I mean, My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante is like, that's the notable exception I was really thinking of. I think Sally Rooney makes a lot of material out of that sort of relationship, but that was one story I was really desperate for at the time. Like, what happens when the sister that you love has the thing that you just lost on top of all of the dynamics that have already made the relationship so complicated, just surviving childhood together.
I think that complexity, that richness is so present, in these stories in the novel. And I think it never feels flat. It always feels like morally complex. It feels emotionally complex. I think you render those relationships between women so beautifully. So, keep going, Anna. Can't wait to read the next one, said your editor without any pressure.
I feel like I don't have a choice. I'm still writing them. Don't worry. I'm not out of steam.
Good. I have a couple of process questions for you, but I also wanted to encourage any viewers who have questions, please drop them in the chat. I already see one or two, so we'll get to those in a couple minutes, but please feel free to ask away. And in the meantime, Anna, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the quality of your prose. I feel like it's so there's an extraordinary way in which I feel like as a reader, I was sort of dropping next to each character on the sofa, as if I was on a couch with them and they were whispering these confidences to me and might not share it with anyone else ever. There's a sense of hushed, sort of urgent storytelling that is really unusual and really wonderful. And I wonder if you can tell us writers in the room, how you came to that and how you achieved that quality.
I don't know if this is actually the true answer, because I don't know. I'd have to think more about that. But the thing that's coming to mind is I'm a therapist as well. That's my day job. I actually just closed my practice like a week ago. So I'm newly not a therapist anymore, but I have been for a long time. And the confessional, like, I'm going to bear witness to your story and just like tell me as much as we can fill in an hour, is that's how I spend many hours of my life. Not including, friends calling and all the other ways that we kind of play, are that resource for other people in our life outside of a professional capacity. But when I first started writing those stories, I was thinking like, well, no one's going to believe that people really talk in this much detail and with this much scope, sort of unprompted. And I didn't really care how realistic it was. I feel like if you're into it, you're into it. And, hopefully we sort of abandon that question of how real is this? We're listening along. So I wasn't too caught up in the realism of it, but my clients do talk like this. I mean, they just and the way that they move through time in their stories is brilliant. I mean, they know exactly when to drop into scene. There's like summary, and Richard Bausch calls it the elegant summary, which is like my favorite thing to write. We're kind of moving over decades, and she took long walks in the morning, and then she had coffee and read a novel, and you're just sort of like giving a texture to even decades. I love writing with that kind of specificity, but also broadness. Is just so much. I love writing that. It's scene that I have a hard. It does not come as easily to me. But my clients and everyone, I just kind of hear biggest chunks from my clients, will just like know exactly when to drop into scene when they're recounting a conversation they had with someone, and they'll use direct dialogue and then reported dialogue, and they know when to quote what needs to be quoted and what needs to be paraphrased. And I think we do kind of generally have that wisdom in how to relay a story most effectively, and what parts are boring, just sort of skip over those and get to the meaty part. And I wonder if I just kind of like listen to that enough that I didn't try to mess with it too much. In my early drafts, I was in this very small writing group. It was just my husband and my childhood friend, actually, not someone who I went to a program with, Madison Newbound, who will have a novel coming out soon, I hope. And I would be kind of coming up against our very informal, but I tried to stick to it, deadline of like, submit 20 or 30 pages or whatever you have. And I would submit to them what I have. And I'd always write something in the email like, oh, I know this is really like rushed and I need to like go into scene more and kind of bulk, add some padding and slow down the pace. Like I'll do all that later. I just kind of want to know if like the story pieces are working, and then I'll like make it good. I'll make it like, real prose. And I basically just never went back, and they were like, I think it's fine. Like, I don't think you need to like intentionally slow it down. So I ended up not going back and kind of giving it more muscle and more padding and slowing it down and being like, oh, I really should go into scene here. Like pause, elegant summary, and dip down and pause back. If I didn't feel like going to scene, I just didn't go into scene. Again, I didn't think anyone would take this book, so it was really nice. I just like, well, I don't feel like writing it, so I'm not going to. I'm not submitting it to workshop. Like the stakes are low, and now I can't imagine writing it any other way.
There's a really lovely question in the chat that I wanted to ask you. In light of recent events, I get a sense that there is a timeliness to this novel. Can you speak to that? So this is obviously, what we're all dealing with as women, having lost, essential rights this past weekend. And I think your book is so timely. What can fiction give us in this time? What do you think a book like yours could do for readers?
Goodness, I don't know what I have hopes for what fiction can do. Because it's done it to me in terms of like feeling seen, feeling held, feeling validated, feeling if you see your story and in someone else's story, seeing your own story as important. I think fiction can and does do that all the time. I'm still really thinking about that question too. And it's not like I didn't think that the abortion debate in our country would be completely resolved by the time my book came out. And I honestly I was just kind of writing about what I was thinking about and what was happening to me. I wasn't thinking too politically. And now I feel really confused about what to do in this time. But I do feel I'm still kind of finding my way and when to act, how to act, also how to protect my own self, because I kind of just want to like pretend it's not happening, but that also feels not right. So nothing quite feels right at the moment. I know that I'm not alone in that. I do have a hope that I know that some people in my extended orbits are receiving this book kind of as gifts from other people that I know more closely, who don't feel the way about the overturning that I do, and might even be happy about it. And I don't think they know much of what my book is about. And I almost don't want them to know at all, and to just sort of like stumble into it and then hear the stories and maybe emerge feeling like at least more complicatedly about it. Because I really, when I'm in a more generous place, which I'm not always, but when I'm in a more generous place about it, I think there are a lot of people out there who have no idea what this means. Like they have no idea that babies who are going to die anyway are not going to be allowed to die without suffering. And they're, you know, the mother might be in ectopic pregnancies that are definitely not viable and that could kill the mom. Like all these other things, I think people aren't, I have to believe that there are a lot of people that have no idea like what this really means. Not just those things, you know, also kind of like your classic situation, but I think the more stories we hear and the more we feel we can see ourselves in those stories as well, I hope can change some people's perspectives. And then I think there's a lot of people who do know exactly what this means and don't care, or like it that way. And those, I'm not writing for those people, to be honest. Like I was mostly writing, you know, to help myself survive. But now at this point where it's out of the world and I feel in a very different place now. I have a daughter. I'm like still grieving this. It's in a different, it's kind of found some context in my life now in a way that it hadn't before. So now I am thinking more about impact on other people more than myself. And the people I really hope find this book are ones that can find some sense of being held in other people's stories and seeing their own stories in them and seeing them as important, and value of being written about and printed. People who might feel exactly the same way as I do about everything. And then people who don't feel the way I do about everything, having the same response and maybe having some shifting. It's an actively in process question and answer for me.
Absolutely. I mean, I love what you said about feeling held by stories. I mean, it's such a profound idea. I mean, it's an idea that encompasses not only sort of reading something creatively, but also I think speaks to a larger sense of like the continuity of history, you know, who we are as a people and how we came to be this way and where we go from here. I mean, these are stories, right? And feeling held by certain stories and feeling left out of others. I mean, this is really, it couldn't be more important, you know, these topics. So thank you for that beautiful answer. And thank you for the question. There's another question in the chat that I think is really interesting. I'm wondering what it's like to write a book with such deep emotions while you are also a psychotherapist holding space for others in their process.
My practice, my relationship with my practice, my therapy practice has changed so much over the course of writing this. I was, you know, in my third year of my MFA when I started it, so I had no practice at all. And then I returned to it during the bulk. So during the bulk of the writing of it, I was pregnant with a pregnancy that ended up being an early miscarriage, and then got pregnant again, which I was very grateful for. And also just a mess, just an anxious mess at this point. And so I wrote the bulk of the book while pregnant and kind of walking in the morning, right? I actually don't remember writing very much. My husband says it happened, and there's evidence of it, but I remember playing a lot of Zelda, because there's really nothing better than getting out of your body than Zelda, and Breath of the Wild is just like the most beautiful thing. See what art can do for you. Zelda can get people through very hard times. And then I would see clients in the afternoon. I would see 5 in a row, which now to me sounds like a lot, but just, you know, basically 5 hours with a 5 to 10 minute break in between. And I feel so much, I can feel drained after a lot of therapy, but just because I'm an introvert and it's a lot of eye contact and a lot of being present, but I also feel so fulfilled because I can just relate. I don't think it's not spoken about too much how much clients can give a therapist. And I have felt like so inspired by my clients' stories, and I don't feel like I'm kind of dragging them around as this baggage, while excavating my own trauma. Like, I really didn't feel that way. I felt like I'm expressing this thing that is coming out no matter whether or not I want it to, this story. And then I get to listen to people talk about their real shit and their shadows and the thoughts they don't tell anyone else and their secrets. And that is just such an honor to be in that seat. So I would be tired by the end of the day, but not because I'm like, oh, I'm holding 5 bags of my clients' baggage and my own baggage. And so that was before I had my daughter. And then it has become a lot harder since then because I don't have a lot of childcare. So just my ability to be present with anyone has just completely depreciated. So but that was harder in different reasons, for different reasons, not so much the baggage part. And I ended up seeing, sort of just happened, I didn't plan it this way. A lot of my clients more recently are around my age, like give or take 5 years. And a lot of them are dealing with trying to get pregnant, losses, postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression.
Mhm.
And I still feel validated by them, just like hearing all the emotions that come with these things that I felt and still feel, especially in pandemic times where I didn't see many people at all. They were kind of the only people I talked to besides my husband. And they're not friends. It's a different relationship, but I did feel kind of a social fulfillment from seeing clients.
Yeah. It makes me think also of your brilliant title. I mean, I know I'm someone who, if you ask me, do you want the short answer or the long answer? Do you want the short story or the long story? 100% of the time, I'm like, the long story, the long answer. And that is actually, I think, what active listening is and what therapy does at its best, right? It sort of allows the longer story has the nuance, it has the detail, and I think you learned so much, I think, from that experience. And it's so present, what you've learned in the novel. Really beautiful. We have 2 minutes, so I'm just going to close with one final question, which is, you have, from what I can tell, the most adorable daughter, Faye. She's 2, I believe, and she seems like a really amazing little human. Sometimes when I call you, she's in the background, like saying really precocious things for her age. It's kind of amazing. What has motherhood taught you about writing, or how has it changed your creative process, if at all?
Oh, it's changed a lot. I mean, because it changes everything. I don't even know where to begin, because I can't pick one part of my life that it hasn't changed. In terms of writing, I mean, I can't really divorce it just from the time, not having time anymore. And I should say that there's parenting with a lot of childcare and there's parenting without a lot of childcare. And I have had, very grateful for the childcare I have had, from my parents, and she just started daycare 2 days a week. So I've been really in the trenches this whole time. Even now, like, I was struggling to find time to do this, and my husband's upstairs putting her down, and he might be listening in his earphones, but probably not. I hear some discontentment coming from upstairs. I actually started writing something soon after she was born, that was like what I thought would interest people. It was like a bit further away from me, and kind of stories. It was still like stories I had heard, but it was more traditional novel. And I didn't feel the sense of urgency. Actually, I was feeling a lot happier. I mean, I was exhausted and parenting is hard, but I felt like, well, I'm not like this walking, bleeding wound anymore. Like, my life is, which is so great. And what if I don't have anything to write about anymore? Like, what if I need something horrible to happen for me to feel that urgency? And I don't believe that I do, but I mean, the complexity of emotion with pregnancy doesn't go away when you have a child. And so I ended up kind of abandoning that book or I put it in a coma. I might come back to it, but writing something new now that feels as urgent as this one, even though I'm in such a different place. Because I mean, for this one, I was thinking like, how does anyone survive pregnancy? And then how does anyone, like I was saying earlier, survive a loss and go on to be pregnant again? And then I had a healthy baby, and it was like, this is everything I wanted. And oh, this is really hard too. Like, this is actually the beginning of something new, and I have no idea how to navigate this either. And at about 18 months, I hit this like pretty desperate point where I was really I felt that hunger for stories of how people have made it through this, especially kind of creative parents who are that, there's like no space for that anymore. And I felt that tailwind come again that I had writing this. And so I don't think I need to be like, really traumatized to write a book, but I think I need to have like a very active dilemma with urgency to I could probably write something like kind of okay without that, but I feel like I'm not really going to be into something until I have that.
Yeah, I think for so many writers, the need to write really comes from the need to work something out. And often writers do that by working it out on the page.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Anna, thank you so much. This was such a joy and a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. We actually haven't met in person. I don't know if people know that, but I feel like I haven't really even talked to you, with video, and it's such a pleasure. And I know you're so busy with your own book launch. So I'm so glad that you could be here.
I want to thank both of you for this wonderful event, and also just say, this is an important topic. Our next book that's coming out is in October, and it's just apropos of everything. Becca Andrews's No Choice, the story of the destruction of Roe versus Wade, coming out October 11th. And we will be in touch. To those of you who want to attend that event, we will do an event for that as well. You both are amazing. Hope everybody orders your books. Thank you for spending your time here and sharing your wisdom. The catch, yes, and the long
Thanks, Anna.
We put links in the chat. We'll see you all very soon, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Good night.
Great.